Hello, I'm Mark Uncapher, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, early voting has begun in Maryland for the 2018 primary on June 26. Do primary endorsements matter, and if so, which ones move the needle? Rogue cops are sentenced in Baltimore as the wrongly convicted sue the city. What is it going to take to fix Baltimore's police department? Should the 2020 census ask questions about immigration status? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by education activist Cynthia Rubenstein, President of the Montgomery County Young Republicans Dan McHugh, Maryland Young Republican National Committeeman Evan Young, and past President of Progressive Maryland Elbridge James. Stay tuned for these stories and more on 21 This Week. Early voting is underway for the June 26 primary. Newspapers, organizations, unions, and other politicians have all weighed in with their picks. It's hard to keep track of all the endorsements, but if you missed who's supporting who, you can weigh the direct mail by the pound for the answer. Elbridge, you know a thing or two about Democratic primary endorsements. Which ones make a difference?
What makes a difference, basically, or who knows whom. In other words, what is your neighbor doing? Who's your neighbor recommending? Who maybe are the people you talk to the most? The endorsements by the Apple ballot is really important if, in fact, the teachers or their associates come out and knock on your door. The Washington Post is good in terms of what the establishment thinks, but in different parts of the county, different Democratic voters think different ways. So it depends on where you stand, what counts.
Well, speaking of the Post, Cynthia, the Post went for Rushern Baker and David Blair, while the State Teachers Union went for Ben Jealous, and the teachers in the county went for Mark Elbridge. Is that a wash, or did one of those candidates have the upper hand?
It's hard to tell at this point. If you want to simplify it in turn, as Elbridge said, Washington Post establishment, and you might add business, and simplistically the other side is labor. So that depends. In jurisdictions, there's a difference. I think for governor, for instance, Rushern Baker has many establishment politicians behind him and has a great record in Prince George's, and so the Washington Post might mean more for him. The teachers union might mean more for Mark Elbridge in Montgomery County.
Good. Evan, out of the more than 30 Democratic Council at Large candidates, only one promises to block property tax increase, cut the county energy tax, and end speed camera fines, and that's Neil Greenberger. But is that message getting any traction at all?
It should, but it's not, and I think that's more of the messenger, not the message, because after Robin Ficker's term limit amendment getting passed, over 70% of the county voted for some sort of shakeup, some new direction for the county council. The one Democrat in their primary that has a different idea when it comes to taxes, apparently, not getting any traction, and he apparently had originally applied to do the public financing and then now has to go private, because that either means he didn't get the requisite number of donors or dollars or both, means his message isn't resonating. And honestly, at early voting, the sites I've been to, haven't seen the signs, haven't seen volunteers. In Germantown on the first night of early voting, everyone else had swarms of volunteers, swarms of candidates there. Haven't seen anything from him, so the message should be getting some traction, but apparently it's not.
Dan, Larry Hogan is unopposed the primary. What choices do Republicans have in the primary?
Well, Mark, let's start at the top. We've got the Senate race. There's about 8 or 9 candidates running. You've got Christina Gregorian. You've got Tony Campbell, of course, and Chris Chafee. You've got Craig Wolf, a fantastic attorney general candidate. Then in the county side, of course, we've got Robin Ficker for county executive. For Congress and Congressional District 6, Ami Hober. And of course, people are very excited about Ed Ematetti running in Council District 2. He's hit over 6,000 doors. He's doing public financing, and he's really on Craig Rice's trail right now.
Here in Montgomery County, this is the first election under our new campaign finance system. These can be multiplied, single donations with matching dollars. Cynthia, how has the system made a difference?
Well, it certainly has made a difference in the at-large race, and there are candidates who came forth who would not have been able to run without this system. And to collect lots of small donors and have those donations multiplied, it has diversified the field for sure for the at-large race.
There's one thing that I want to toot my own horn, because as Progressive Maryland, we push for that campaign change, that finance change. We also understand that it is risky, because you give Republicans who choose to want to get into this opportunities. But we believe it's time for a change with regard to getting more persons into office.
Well, we'll wrap things up right now and come back and talk about some other issues. Let's wrap up talking about the primary with quick predictions as to who's going to win the Democratic primaries for governor and for county executive.
Baker, Leventhal.
Ben Jealous, Mark Ulrich.
Oh, man. Baker and no clue.
Baker
Who's
and
big?
Blair.
No clue.
Baker and Blair.
Well, one of the other issues that should get some more attention is the Baltimore police scandal, and I want to talk about that. It's really a truly shocking development of a group of police officers who have been convicted and are sentenced to up to 25 years in federal prison. These cops admit that rather than doing what they were supposed to do about getting illegal guns off the street, they were involved in robbery, racketeering, and civil rights violations. According to the Baltimore State's attorney, some 1,700 criminal cases may be affected by what they're doing. Cynthia, what can be done to address this problem?
Well, the first matter at hand is to wade through 1,700 cases. Any of those cases that involve any of these officers as a material witness will have to be dismissed, and there are even convictions that may be vacated. What this means for Baltimore is that there are some bad actors that will be back on the street, so this makes the work of the police department even harder. It also is another setback after a previous setback with Freddie Gray in 2015. So this is like, 2 steps forward and 10 steps back for Baltimore.
Dan, many people have a reflexive tendency to give police officers the benefit of the doubt, yet this scandal calls that into question. Can people in Baltimore trust their police department?
I think they can eventually. We are only 3 years into 2015 when they started wearing body cameras, and body cameras are starting to, hold police more accountable. There was an incident recently in Montgomery County where an individual was shot in Silver Spring. People jumped to conclusions that the cop killed the person unarmed, but the body camera showed that the police officer was assaulted by an individual, and the cop acted appropriately into what happened. Body cameras, I think, a lot of these cops probably weren't wearing body cameras when they did some of these things. Now that they're wearing body cameras, I think that you're going to see a lot more accountability, and we're already seeing that.
Evan, other cities like New York have addressed this police corruption issue, and they also have lower murder rates. Are those two factors related with each other?
When you have police that are planting drugs and trafficking guns, you've got a lot of lives ruined and parents that aren't home with their kids anymore because of things that these officers did in Baltimore. But I'm not going to sit here and say that a corrupt cop is going to make someone who otherwise would not be a murderer go out and shoot somebody. In alternate reality, the Montgomery County Police could be the most corrupt police force on earth, and they could deliver 100 guns to my living room. Still 0% chance I go out and murder anybody. So they can't affect what your morality is or what your sense of right or wrong is. But it can just create an environment overall where crimes that would have been enforced before weren't, or people who might have been on the edge between going the right direction or the wrong path, when the people who are supposed to be protecting you and supposed to be protecting the 600,000 people that live in Baltimore aren't doing so. The vast majority aren't murderers, but it can have some effect.
I'm glad you ended on that note, because I would took a different tone with regard to if I have police that are in fact planting guns, planting evidence, and then send me an innocent person. down a path I do not want to choose. I cannot determine where I'll end up if, in fact, I don't have that opportunity to live the best life I can live. This incident shows that corruption, which I believe these police officers said it's a good old boy network and we can do what we want to do, and it affects many lives. Just like with the riots we're saying with regard to where block grant money went in previous years and monies that should have gone into better communities and better policing got turned and went to businesses developing themselves in Baltimore while the community suffered. There were a lot of things that politicians and police officers did in Baltimore that have to be addressed. This will be an awakening for them.
But we'll end that with that particular note and come back. Baltimore Mayor Pugh is heading a national task force fighting a Trump administration plan to add a census question about whether people are in the country illegally. Attorney General Frosch has weighed in with a lawsuit to oppose it. Dan, how about it? Should Census be able to ask a question of an immigration status in 2020?
Sure. I mean, so don't they ask about your criminal, if you were ever charged with a felony or a misdemeanor? I mean, if you're not here legally, you've committed a crime, and, yeah, that should be allowed to be asked.
Cynthia, the Census Bureau has an excellent record with protecting the confidentiality of responses. Can't they be trusted to collect this information?
I don't know if they can be trusted in the Trump administration. I think that the Trump administration is having a chilling effect across the board for many people who are afraid to be counted. And so I think it's an inappropriate question. Plus, the census is to count every person. And I don't think it's right to put in a citizenship question which might keep some people from answering.
Evan, no one knows how many non-citizens there are in this country, whether they're here illegally or as on a visa or here illegally. So what do you think about a census question like that?
This is where the libertarian streak in me comes in, and I don't want the government knowing pretty much anything about me. Something I had to remind my friends who supported Bernie Sanders was, they wanted the government to do everything, give you everything, expand at rapid, never before seen rates. I had to remind them that one day Bernie Sanders wouldn't be president and the guy you don't like would be, and they still have that power that you gave that government then. So I'd prefer to give as little information, legal or illegal. I don't want them knowing much of anything about me. I think over the past couple of years, the FBI, the IRS, Department of Justice have given us more than enough reasons to not trust the government. So the less they know about me, less they have on me, the better.
It was James Madison who suggested that adding census questions beyond just the identity of a person would help the government prepare with addressing problems. So, Elbridge, why is Mayor Pugh blocking one census question as such a priority?
We have seen that when you ask questions that people are uncomfortable with, they don't participate. And one of the critical factors of the census is finding out how many people are in this country. Not necessarily whether they're legal or illegal. You can find it other ways. We know how many legal citizens we have in this country. So if you have 100 people for the census and you know that 85 are U.S. citizens, then you can tell who the rest are either legal or illegal, which really shouldn't make a difference for the census. You can find that information. The census is based on what funding that states and municipalities get. And so she wants to make sure she gets the most funding, the more appropriate funding for her citizens, and they are not denied their equal right to get that funding. This is one of the questions. We've seen also that when you challenge the immigrant community, they're less likely to report crimes and report abuses. And we want to be more transparent and allowing them to come to us versus basically shy away for their own bad.
Let me try it a different way. What if instead of asking whether you're legal or illegal, if you asked for the citizenship or nationality? Obviously, there are many people who are in this country on green cards or on other kinds of visas. So it wouldn't be calling out somebody's illegal status, but it would identify them as being a citizen of another country and not a U.S. citizen.
But that's not what the question asked.
I understand, but
that's not why we're here. And so that has to be really that thought has to be examined because there's merit to that, but there could be some drawbacks. I'm just not prepared to say, whether that's a good thing or not a good thing. But as the question stands now, it's basically going to prevent people from answering the census versus encouraging them.
Cynthia?
I'm with Elbridge. I think that anything that asks you where you are from would make someone hesitant, certain people hesitant. And as Elbridge said, this is about the money. This is about the money and funding for jurisdictions that have high needs, and the mayor wants to make sure she gets Baltimore's share for the people she has to take care of.
But historically, we've gotten, Evan, we've gotten nationality numbers, people coming from their Scottish heritage, French heritage, Italian heritage, and that's been information that's been tracked by the census.
And from what I've read, this question was on the census up until year 2000, so it's not like it was unheard of for a citizenship question to be included. I'm just convinced the NSA has every phone call I've ever made logged away somewhere. So I'm perfectly legal. I was born at Shady Grove Hospital, but I want to interact with federal government as little as possible.
Dan, you want the last word?
I think, at the end of the day, look, we keep track on crime. You've been convicted of felonies and misdemeanors and other things, and not being here legally is a crime. And that
Actually, it's not. It's a civil offense, but go ahead.
Well, you have broken the law in a sense,
yes.
and that should be kept track, like most other crimes are kept track and are tracked.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and when we return, we'll do parting shots. Here in Montgomery County, this is the first election under our new public campaign system. Small dollar contributions can be multiplied many times over with matching money. Cynthia, has the new system made a difference?
Yes, it has made a difference. There's a much more diverse field of candidates running and able to raise money that they wouldn't have been able to raise under the old system.
Evan, 4 years ago, Larry Hogan used the state's public campaign system and was outspent. This year, he's piling up money the way a squirrel stockpiles acorns for a long winter. Can an underfunded candidate beat him?
Absolutely. 4 years ago, Larry Hogan was the underfunded candidate that won, and won in a state where Republicans are outnumbered more than 2 to 1. So an underfunded Democrat in a state with much more favorable demographics for them could win if voters went in and just voted along the lines of Republicans voted for Republicans and Democrats voted for Democrats. But we've seen that in 2014, and still with Governor Hogan's highest in the nation approval ratings, at least when it comes to that office, voters look past just the letter next to the name and actually think about the individual. And I'll throw in 2016, David Trone threw away $14 million, I think it was, and couldn't get out of a primary. So underfunded, overfunded, I think around here it probably comes down to who's the best candidate.
Elbridge, David Blair has self-financed while Ben Jealous has benefited from a lot of out-of-state money. When it comes to the source of political money, what do voters care about?
Voters care about what your message is. David Blair has shown that he has the bucks to do it. Ben Jealous shows that he has a message that at least resonates by funders that were willing to back his campaign. But it still matters when you hit the ground and when you communicate with people and touch people, whether they're going to vote for you or not vote for you. Our current governor did a better job of reaching the average citizen than his Democratic candidate, and that's why he's governor.
Dan, you're involved with campaigns. What do you think in terms of financing?
Well, you have big money candidates. You have, you've seen things like Evan pointed out with David Trone, $14 million in 2016 to lose to Jamie Raskin. So, money matters, but not always. The best example, of course, is President Trump, who was outspent by $400 million by Hillary Clinton when we had President Trump. So money matters, but sometimes, like Elbridge says, messaging matters too.
Well, now we'll lead off with parting shots and start with Cynthia.
Okay, so we have a primary election going on. We have early voting from now through Thursday the 21st, and primary day is the 26th. Everybody should go out to vote. This is a very important election year, even though it's not a presidential election year. But all politics is local, and the county executive race is a big race, and the county council race is a big race, and the gubernatorial is a big race. Those are elections that really matter on the ground for most people, and that really hit your pocketbook. So get out and vote.
Dan?
Well, my parting shot is that who would have thought that, special thanks to Donald Trump on Twitter and Elton John would make the world a better place. Rocket Man. Donald Trump had a breakthrough meeting with the leader of North Korea, and thanks to Elton John and Donald Trump on Twitter for making the world a little more peaceful.
And Dennis Rodman.
And Dennis Rodman.
Evan?
I too will talk about early voting. It started on Thursday. There's a week of it. There's absentee voting. There's election day voting. So there's really no excuse not to vote. I go on Facebook, social media, Twitter, whatever. 100% of people have opinions, and most of them are just awful. But in 2014, only 20% voted in our primary. We do better than the national average. In 2016, 71% of the state turned out to vote, opposed to 55% across the country. But there's still no reason for that not to be 100% when it couldn't be simpler to take whatever you're complaining about on the internet and go actually try to do something about it in person.
There you go. Elbridge?
I want to piggyback upon that because we need our newer, younger citizens to step up and vote. When the look at politicians and politicians say, what do my constituents really want? They gauge it by who goes out and votes. If our younger citizens don't take this serious, their voice is not heard. And this is something we need to have our younger citizens to be encouraged to go out and vote. That is critical for the safety of this country.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. How many of you have already voted?
I voted yesterday.
Cynthia?
I'll be voting Monday at about 2:30.
Elbridge?
I'm voting Monday.
Voted today at Potomac
So
Community
we
Center.
got a lot of early voters. Thank you all for listening to 21 This Week, Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. I'd like to thank my guests for the informative discussion. We'll see if all your predictions came true. Cynthia, we're not sure about yours on county executive, but we'll see what
Not either,
happens.
but I'll know by 2:30 on Monday.
Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and thank you all.